he had already written 400 short stories, 480 short stories, which eventually would be combined into his larger volume, The O'Hara Generation. And he wrote for Vanity Fair, The New Yorker, McCall's, Atlantic Monthly, and his time at The New Yorker, there was a little over 200 critical pieces. So he was, by the time he was 24 years old, he had written more than anybody else at that table had written in that period of time. So in 34, he writes Appointment in Samaria and Butterfield 8. Both of these novels are banned in Europe and Australia. So he becomes part of the banned book list. And the reason why he's very important to this second group is, one, he fundamentally outshines all of the early founders of the Algonquin Round Table in sheer numbers of what he's written, and the amount of novels that he was able to host. So also between 24 and 34, he becomes press agent, radio host, commentator, and film critic. And his film critic time, there are a little over 150 film critiques he had written. So that means that he had written for almost every film that had come out in that period. Remember, films were not quick, put together, let's get it done, as they are today, where a studio can put together, 15, 20, 30 films in a year. At that time, they were putting together a handful per quarter. So, anyways, he goes on and writes musicals as well. And writes Pal Joey, which brings claim to Broadway. Now, all of this stuff was going on while he was being persecuted by his friends at the Round Table. He was the most gossiped about man that sat there. And by the end, he was so emotionally distraught over how these people treated him that he turned into the opposite. He went from the concept of liberal political and social framework to a very conservative social framework. So that put him on the outs with the major critics of the time, which are those people that he sat with. And so in 1950, he wrote a weekly book column, Sweet and Sour, for the Trenton Times. And he wrote that until he died. And he was a bi-weekly columnist. It was called Appointment with O'Hara in Collier's Press. And in '64, he wrote daily for Newsday. But what I want to talk about is, what did he give? What did he give us? Well, he believed he became fodder for the elite, which he always considered himself, but he never felt he was a part of. And a lot of it revolved around the fact that he had no collegiate education. So here we are. let's see. He wrote 200. He wrote 1,928 pieces for the New Yorker, 17 novels, 480 short stories, 13 collections, 2 screenplays, 7 Broadway plays, 3 nonfictions, 1 autobiography, 1 autobiography, and this is what he was awarded. 3 of his adaptations to Broadway gave him 3 Academy Awards and 3 Golden Globes. He was a nominee 18 times for the Pulitzer, never awarded. 18 times, 17 for his 17 novels, 1 time for his autobiography. Never received a Pulitzer, but was nominated. And he was a 2-time nominee for the Nobel Prize in Literature. He was outflanked by the 2 men that he despised the most. Hemingway, who he wrote great things about early in Hemingway's career. But because Hemingway decided, and this is his quote, because Hemingway decided to kill himself, we should give him a Nobel Prize. Well, the hell with him. That's how he felt. But he did have fond friends. Fran Lebowitz, John Updike, John Steinbeck, T.S. Eliot, and William F. Buckley. George Plimpton, the Auchincloss brothers, and John Perry. What was interesting is he kept his enemies closer than he kept his friends. And one of them being the great Gore Vidal. And he wrote scathing critiques of Gore Vidal's novels, as well as Gore Vidal writing scathing critiques about John O'Hara's novels. And there's actually a book called Gore and Vidal that was produced by Princeton Press that just is their critiques of each other. You could read them almost simultaneously. What his great claim to fame, though, is he became chairman of the Department of Literature and Humanities at Princeton University. The only man in Princeton history not to hold a degree, but to chair a department and to teach aspiring writers. So that's John O'Hara's background. He is the least liked, but he's the least liked. But let me also talk about 3 other things, and these are national awards. And this is post death. This is as of 2000, I think 2010. 2 National Book Awards, and 10 of his 17 novels are on the 100 must-read list. You must read them. And Great Britain, who he was a great friend of, he loved London society, he loved the Brits, and they state that 2 of his 17 novels were the best novels written in English format. So that's John O'Hara. I believe you've got some stuff for us. Oh, okay. We'll do the midway break then. So I'm just going to close up on John O'Hara. His friendship with George Plimpton was able, and George Plimpton was a very young teenager at the time. He brought John O'Hara brought George Plimpton into the circle, and George Plimpton, actor, writer, critic, and founder of the Paris Review, probably one of the best review magazines in the world. And John O'Hara always said about Plimpton that he was going to bring the Paris school and the New York school together, and with that he did. Anyways, John O'Hara dies in 1970 of cardiovascular disease, and he dies at his home in Princeton. And in 1986, Princeton University presented a statue in his benefit, and on the base of the statue it states, a man from common origins to greatness. So anyways, that ends our second segment of the Algonquin Roundtable. I'd like to thank the Patch and its Board of Trustees for allowing us the space. I'd like to thank Martha and Carol and Kurt Thompson for his videography. And I'd also like to thank Peter Duffy for his ingenious idea of the ink tank. And that's it. And we will see you next month for British Romantics.